would like to respond to the question about whether sanction can, negatively impact workers or activists in China. In fact, I do think that sanction can be carried out in different ways. One of the possible ways that can really bring impact to the communist regime without compromising the interests of normal citizens is trying to limit some technology export to Hong Kong. Because we know that for a long while, the Communist Party is trying to utilize Hong Kong as a free harbor to transport a lot of high-tech or sensitive weapons and technologies to mainland China. And we do believe that if the foreign society can ban those and the selling of those sensitive technologies, including weapons, to the Hong Kong police force, and that can keep pressure on Hong Kong and also both Chinese government. And that kind of sanction won't have a great impact on local citizens and ordinary people in the civil society. And of course, in the long run, maybe if China still try to repress Hong Kong, the situation is getting worse. And then maybe we have to escalate the movement and we have to escalate the sanction. But overall, we are not saying that we have to sanction the whole China as an entity, including 1.4 billion Chinese people at the same time. And for me, I would say that if the international community can try to implement or introduce some sanctions that can limit those state-owned companies in China or in Hong Kong, that will be already quite helpful, because we are not saying you have to shut down and help shut down those local factories in mainland China. We are not saying you have to punish all the Chinese workers and activists once and for all. We are saying for those state-owned companies, they already make a lot of profit among those neighbors without paying them with a very, without beneficially paying them with a satisfied salary. And then for those state-owned companies, this is quite sensible for the international communities, especially the UK government, to ban them from using foreign market, ban them to expel them to enter your market and try to harm the autonomy and also harm the interests of Hong Kongers. And I do believe that actually, for example, the UK Congress, another congressman named Kat Yoho, he is going to introduce a bill in the US Congress named the Hong Kong Autonomy Act. According to that act, that authorized the US President and the State Department to try to limit the capital flow of some state-owned companies in China if they try to do something bad to the local society, if they try to help the regime repress local citizens and activism in local level, and those companies will no longer be welcomed by the rest of the world. And I think in this direction, that is quite promising, and this kind of sanction can also help target on those state-owned enterprises who actually they work very closely with the Communist Party. They are part of the regime, and they also did something really evil and bad to China and Hong Kongers, and those companies should be sanctioned, and it won't negatively impact the livelihood and well-being of ordinary citizens. Yeah. And also, I think I read that question that raised by one of the participants, and he mentioned that is there any connection between Hong Kong activism and and other people like the Uyghurs on in Tibet and Xinjiang. Of course, there are. I mean, Hong Kongers. Frequently, when we do international lobbying, when we met some people from Tibet and Xinjiang, of course we emphasize on the connectivity and attachment. We emphasize the network that we can build, and we care about what we can do for each other. I mean, especially when last year, many Hong Kongers went to the US, try to help push forward the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. And a lot of Uyghurs and Tibetans, local society, local lobbying groups in DC, they also help Hong Kongers push forward the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. This kind of solidarity is really essential for Hong Kongers, because we know that not just Hong Kongers suffer from the Communist Party. Many other ethnic groups, they also suffer from the Communist Party. If we stay strong, if we are united, if we build solidarity, and that is really helpful, and that will be promising in terms of containing the expansion of and authoritarian China. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sonny. Paul, if you could come in now, please.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, obviously, as a British person, I have to start by acknowledging that British imperialism in the 19th and 20th centuries shaped this situation. And that when we say the word sanctions, we have to make sure, we have to remember that economic and military pressure was what created more than a century of slavery for China. And unless we accept that and acknowledge it, we can't move on as equals now in the world situation where sanctions are a potential tool to achieve a goal. But I do think if we think about sanctions, we have to think about what is the achievable goal. Now, for me, looking at it completely in a very like unvarnished way, possibly one of the things to achieve is a retreat back to one country, two systems. So that would achieve, a large degree of freedom for the Hong Kong labor movement, the Hong Kong students and democracy protesters, and maybe even open up universal suffrage, proper democracy in Hong Kong. Because that is, of course, my wider goal, and a more important goal, to be honest, is democracy in China itself. But we're not going to get that in the next 5 years through sanctions. We need to understand as well the way that US imperialism is thinking. For them, their move to a new competitor status with China is not about Hong Kong and Taiwan. In fact, I think that one of the results of this new strategic competition may be that the USA actually retreats from the South China Sea and allows China more room to operate, because what it wants to do now is to contain China in the entire world. If you think about it, it's like saying, look, in your own backyard, fine, do what you want, but don't, take your hands off Latin America, take your hands through Belt and Road off the rest of Asia, India. We know that India, for example, has flipped now under Modi completely over to an anti-China position. So just trying to contextualize the geopolitics. But I think the next thing, we need to understand what the next step of the USA is going to be. And I can tell you from my contacts and sources that it is likely that they will use the so-called Wuhan lab narrative, the idea that it was either a biological weapon or an accident. This will be used to construct a case for reparations. So this is the next thing. So in that context, I think that the kind of sanctions, and I've been a supporter of sanctions against Putin's Russia, the kind of sanctions that we can talk about are ones that not only, I think primarily, limit the room for maneuver and discourage the CCP bureaucracy from doing what they're doing. And they are the things that I've mentioned before, Andreas mentioned before, the idea of targeting specific individuals with movement bans, with bank account shutdowns, with arrest warrants for people involved in Xinjiang, for example. We can do that. The other thing to understand is that some of the most targeted sanctions would have to be taking place here in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom's City of London financial district is completely under control of CCP-aligned finance. Now, this involves getting big investment banks, public affairs companies, the people who represent China here, to actually drop their preferential contracts. I think that's possible as well. The final thing is one more thing to understand that in the next period, a lot of American political attacks will come against the CCP as an entity. But you will understand better than me, those who live close to it, that the CCP as an entity, even so, is a stratified entity. It recruits 2% of society from top to bottom. So yes, the super rich, the billionaires with their villas and swimming pools, but also peasants, also students, also workers. I think the aim of a smart working class socialist campaign in solidarity with Hong Kong is to appeal also to people at the base of the CCP. And the appeal is quite simple. Why are you going to the trouble of screwing up an arrangement that was actually working for you? So it's about discouraging and about creating a message into the mass base of the CCP itself. Final point for us in the UK. I'm glad that Lisa Nandy, our Shadow Foreign Secretary, has put a strong statement against Standard Charters and HSBC. I know that she and her team are strongly in support of Hong Kong's rights. No, I'm sad to say, under Corbyn, there may have been more difficulties. Not because of Corbyn himself, but because of some of his allies, most notably in the Morning Star newspaper, the communist newspaper, and the people who support that. But we have an excellent opportunity. The Labour Party conference is cancelled this year, but it won't be cancelled forever. When it comes back, and there may be a virtual conference, when it comes back, we have an excellent opportunity to commit the Labour Party to a position of targeted sanctions. And I think we can do that. And it will be an iconic moment, because it will be a moment where those pro-CCP, pro-Putin elements will oppose the Labour, but this time we have the leadership with us.
Oh, sorry. I've noticed that there's one person who's got the hand up, Ben. The only thing I'm worried about is the time, whether or not it's actually possible to get one more participant in. If the person could come in, if we could let Ben come in, but if he could be exceptionally disciplined. So if we could let Ben in, please, if that's possible.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I forgot my hand was still up, but I was going to ask, following Paul's point about the sanctions and things other people have said, one thing that we know is that even where governments don't implement sanctions, stuff doesn't get exported or moved and services don't get provided without the cooperation of workers here or in other countries. So what opportunities, what key strategic points, like choke points, things that would actually place serious pressure on the Chinese government's ability to do what it's doing and the ability of businesses like HSBC to continue doing what they're doing? What things might workers in this country try and block and disrupt through our own withdrawal of labour and direct action? I'm thinking here of somebody mentioned the Uyghur Solidarity Campaign, which I'm involved in, and we should collaborate more. That we tried just before the lockdown, we started trying to do protests in shops that were involved in the forced labour scandal, where Uyghurs from Xinjiang were conscripted into forced labour. But even more powerful than that would be workers in those companies themselves getting organised around it. But yeah, what kind of key opportunities, choke points might there be for us to act like that?